Mixing on the MPC is easy, you're just making it hard. In this video, I'm gonna be sharing with you 5 steps to guide you to a great mix. And this is a practical approach, not a subjective one, because most of you already know these 5 steps, but without the structure and the context, you will always stay confused and overthinking every move you make. But by the end of this video, you'll have a better focus on your mixes and how to really build on top of that and learn on your own, which is very important. So let's just jump right into it. So let's hear the beat. When I listen to this, and even you could just look at the file, man, this is like very distorted. And that brings us to our first step, which is leveling. So the first step to leveling is to pick a focal point. Now, when I hear this beat, the bass is that focal point. Like, I still want my bass to stick out like that. So that's what I'm gonna focus on first. And we can just go to our mix. We can go to pan and volume, and we can solo our 808. And let's just see where our level is at with our 808. If we double click, we can see we're at like plus 6 dB. Now, if you're coming from a DAW, people probably told you that it's bad to get to 0, but on MPC is a different story. And we don't have to get all technical about this and everything. Just understand the MPC has a bit of a soft clipper. So that's why you're able to see past 0 on the meter, because once it gets past that 0 threshold, it starts to, you know, round it out, but give it a bit of that warmth or distortion or whatever you want to call it, saturation. And obviously you'll know the more you go up, it will start to sound unpleasing. So always trust your ears. So I'm gonna just bring my 808 down a bit, maybe just keep it at 0. This does sound a bit cleaner, but we lose that essence of that gritty 808. So that's why we still gotta level everything else. Let's just mute the melody, mute the lead, and we can focus on the drums now. When I focus on the drums, I wanna just tap on that track, go to mix, and a cool thing you could do is go to settings and do filter by events. And that's only gonna show what is being used in MIDI. So it's like only the drum sounds that you've been using and not showing all the other pads. So that just cleans up your mixer view. And I could just bring all these levels down and we could just start back over. Okay. The kicks sound really good where it's at. And then we could bring up our hi-hats. I like to just do the hi-hats, then do my snare. The reason why I like to start at low, because then you can kind of bring it up and you'll kind of hear that sweet spot. Like if it came in too hot like that, hell nah. And if it's too low, you don't really feel no vibe with the hi-hats. But like right here, sounds right. And then we can do our snare. And then you just go throughout the rest of your drums like that. So now we can hear our 808s and our kicks kind of sound like it's at the forefront and everything else is just kind of supporting it. And then we could just bring that melody in. And then let's just do our leads. And understand with the melodies, the way you will level it is just about what melody you want to stand out more. Like, yes, you should have your melody stick out a bit more than your chords or your other supportive elements, but mixing is about your personal point of view. So you may hear this lead and be like, I want that lead to stick out more than the actual melody. And that's kind of what I want. So now that we got our levels, let's just hear a before and after. Now, Now off the back, that just sounds a lot more balanced and a lot more cleaner in my ears. It's not like the melody is too loud or the bass is too loud. I can actually hear my vocals if I jump on the track or if another artist jumps on the track. Now that we have our leveling in a good spot, now we can move on to the second step, which is stereo imaging and panning. And I put these together because they do play hand to hand. You know, you're creating that space, that depth. One thing to understand, if we go to our mix, I already panned this from the previous video. If I was to just solo this lead, it was in the center, but I just moved it a bit over. And even just moving it a bit over 8, it does make a difference when you hear it all in context. Here's the thing, you probably already know about panning and you're probably not really using it in your mixes as much, or you're panning too much. And what I mean by panning too much is if you look at the wave, you can see that some of these sounds is already panned. That is already a bit panned. You can see this right side is a bit higher than the left side. That is also like the stereo width of it. And this is how your focal point, which is our 808, stands out, because everything is kind of moving away from the 808, and that allows the 808s and the kick to go through along with the snare, because that's a straight mono in the center. And if we go to our drums, open hat is already panned a bit to the right. Hi-hat is already panned a bit to the left. Sounds is already panned is what I'm trying to say. And this is why I said you might hear about panning from another tutorial, and you may think in your head, oh, I need to start panning everything, without realizing that a lot of the sounds that you're probably working with is already going to be panned. So therefore, this step is a lot faster and easier. Hi-hat rolls is straight up the middle, which is fine because I have my main hi-hats a bit to the left. And let's just hear how it would sound if I moved it to the right. Just go to pan and volume. That sounds a bit cool, just having it pan +7. Have my crash already up the center, but since it's at a low volume, it's not interfering with the rest of my sounds. You see what I'm saying? I'm just analyzing for myself. I don't need some engineer to be next to me or watch many tutorials on this. Like, just pay attention to your mix, bro. And I could even pan my open hi-hats to be a bit more center and not too much on the right. And from there, that's how I think about my panning. Like, that part is done. Now I can focus on my stereo imaging, because stereo imaging is creating a depth, whether something sounds further back or more in your face. And the first thing I want to start off with is the 808. And you don't have to do this all the time to your 808s, but you do just kind of want to make sure if your 808s is in mono or it's in stereo. So if your 808s is too much in stereo, it could kind of sound washed out at an event, and that's obviously not going to sound good. So the safe bet is to always have your low end a bit tight and not just everywhere else. And you could just hear it when I turn it down. That sounds a bit more focused, but also I would argue and say that the stereo sounds a bit more in the face, and it has like this nice texture that I like. The thing I like about the stereo width plugin is that I can actually save the highs. So I can actually put this back to a 100% width and take out the lows in the mono. At least the highs are spread, and I still can get best of both worlds. You see how easy it just kind of makes sense to just put two together? Obviously, if you're a beginner and you probably didn't know to think in that way, that's fine. It doesn't mean that mixing is hard. It just means that you don't have enough experience to be like, oh, that's how you came up with that decision. And it's important that you understand that, because a lot of you be saying things are hard. I don't even like to use that word. I just think about anything that I do is just new, because anytime you do something more than once, what happens? You get better at it. So then hard is really just what we come up in our head. And to dive a bit deep into that, if we never knew what the word hard meant, and in that context that is being used in, would we ever think anything is hard? Just saying. Now, this main lead sound like it can use some stereo with controlling. I don't know what yet, but let's just hear how it would sound if it was mono. So I like it a bit stereo, but I'm probably just gonna drop the lows in mono. To be on the safe side, what you can really actually do is just put your leads and your melody in a submix. So actually, let's just do that. So let's just turn this off, and all you have to do is just hold down on it. I can go to my inputs and just switch this to a submix. Let's go up actually. Put this all on submix 1, so all my melodies are on submix 1, and I could go to effects, just swipe over. Submix 1 is where my melodies are. Go to my stereo width and drop the lows in mono. Now, unless I wanted to add like a certain type of stereo width to any of my sounds, then I would have done that separately, but I don't get too caught up. Like, bro, this already sounding good. Another thing to remember is like, if you have quality sounds, you don't have to do too much. And if you're making trap beats, bro, if you're making trap beats, just stop it. Stop bringing the acoustic mixing style into a trap genre. You need to know the genre that you're mixing in, because each genre does have a different set of mix. Like an R&B mix is going to be different from a trap mix, because, you know, trap really focused on those drums to be loud and in your face. More so, R&B got a nice balance with it. At least that's how I hear it. But you know that there's a difference in these genres that you hear. So before and after. It just sounds a bit more glued to me. Now we have our stereo and panning a bit good, and we can move on to the third step, which is correction and enhancement with EQ. Pretty much in this step, you're just trying to create space with EQ. Like if you were in a room and there was just like stuff everywhere, the way I like to think about EQ is that you're cleaning it up, you're organizing it. Like you see my couch is over here, and you know, my mic and stuff is right here. It's not like my mic is on top of the couch. You feel me? Or my C-stand is like right behind me and it's not organized. Just think about EQ like organizing your room. You're trying to make space to where it fits nicely and create a nice picture. With that said, melodies definitely probably have low end in it. Let's start off with my melodies. Let's start off with the correction. Let's go to the submix, go to effects. I'm gonna go to an EQ, and I like to use para EQ because, you know, it got most of the main functions that I need. And then I could go to high and low cut. I'm gonna turn on my low cut. Here's where EQ cheat sheets come into hand. These are the tools that y'all should be using. Most of the times they say to cut your melodies to 100 to 150 hertz so that it doesn't, you know, interfere with the bass or the kick. Not have to have a visual plug-in in front of me, and I could just be like, okay, let me just go to 100 and just train my ears and see if I can hear the difference. Remember, start extreme. So at 530, I can hear a difference. Let's do on and off. Now, I don't know about you, but I heard a bit of that thump just kick through a bit more because we made space. Even if it's like a small difference, it's really not a small difference when it comes to mixing. This was like sweeping my room. And you could just imagine if you had a lot of dirt on the ground, that sweeping your room does make a big difference. And this is how I kind of look at that. So that's cool. We made some space like that. There is a piercing sound in one of the leads, and I think it was the first lead. So let's just solo that. It's like a really shining sound. You don't really want that, or I don't really want that. But I would say most of us, you don't really want a piercing sound like that in your mix, because if they're listening at loud volumes, because you know people like to listen to their music loud, you don't want that to be sticking out, because that could really just ruin your whole song. So there are a couple things that aren't subjective and I think that most people will hate. Then I want to just look at the highs because I know it's somewhere in the highs. And I can easily find it by turning up my gain and then also turning down my bandwidth, because I think when you go left is your bandwidth, we'll find out. And I think this should be around 5,000 to 8,000 kilohertz. So let's just hear it. Notice how I brought it at 20 and you don't really hear it. But the goal is to hear it. You will know that 20 is way far from your target. So you hear it a bit more at the 5 to 6K hertz. And if you use the EQ cheat sheet, it would tell you that that piercing sound is usually between that 5 to 8K, like that sizzling sound. And now we could just draw back on that. And see, for me, I don't care to really go all the way down to negative 12 dB because most of the sound is like in the mid-range anyway. Like, just hear it. If I bring up the highs, then that's just bringing in that piercing frequency that I don't want. So there you go. Like, I took out that sound intentionally. I didn't get all in my head and think that I had to just use the EQ for no reason. And then I could just bring up the output gain just to like fill out that frequency a bit more. Kind of creates that illusion that I didn't cut nothing, but all I did was made that cut and then just bring up the overall volume of that newer sound. So don't get lost at that part. And if you kind of already been feeling lost with a couple of these steps, or you just didn't know what the stereo whip plugin can do and what it's used for and when to use it and stuff like that, and you don't understand compression or you don't understand EQ, when, what to use it and how, then you can sign up and join the waitlist for this mixing course that I'm gonna put out. So if that sounds good to you, you can enroll right now and get a special discount before it launches. You can sign up in the link below. So now the fourth step will be dynamics, and that is compression. So when I'm hearing the beat right now, the way I use compression is only in one main context, even though compression can be used in different contexts, but the main context you're going to be using it is to tame your dynamic range. In this genre too, we're going to probably compress our drums a bit just to get that thickened sound with our drums and also to make it sound more punchy. So let's just do that. I like, since we have a drum track, we can just easily put it on the track itself, kind of like how a submix will work. I like to just stick with the air compressor. This default setting is wild. I don't know why the threshold is like negative 40,000. Like, we're gonna have to pull that up, and before you even press play, take your output down, man. 15 is crazy. Now our ratio could be a bit high, and you'll see why. So you can see we're not really getting any reduction, and we just need to bring down the threshold. And then you start to hear the difference. You don't want to compress too much with your drums. Just gonna bring up the attack. Bring down my release. And then once you got the settings that you like, you can do before and after. Yeah, and that just feels like it hits a lot harder and sounds harder to me. As long as you A/B what you're doing, then at least you'll know that it's sounding better than what it was before. Now, one last thing I would like to do with this dynamic step is to sidechain my 808 and the kick. We're gonna go into our kick, and we're gonna add that mother ducker input, and then you wanna add the mother ducker on the 808 or whatever you want to duck. So then for mother ducker, you know, the settings be kind of crazy. You don't want to start with 6, bro. It will be too wild of a sidechain. You can see that it's ducking too much and probably too hard. So I like to just be around 3. And then threshold, you just gotta mess with your ears. bring that down. You obviously don't want a long release because then it's going to be ducking too long. Like you need it to come back up at some point. And then, like I said, just do an A/B to see if it sounds right to you. And then I'll probably just kind of turn down my 808 just a little, just because it kind of brought up the 808s a bit. And then the last step will just be effects. And yes, we already put effects, but what I mean by effects is creative effects, like your reverb, your delay, or, you know, like a phaser or a chorus. But when you have quality sounds, or the sounds you already like and it sounds good to you, you don't have to overdo it. As long as the composition is good and it's somewhat balanced in the levels, like they can hear the melody and they can hear that 808, even if the 808 is a bit louder, but they can kind of still hear that melody, they're gonna hop on the beat. That's why I say to focus more on the composition and not mixing. If you find yourself having to do a lot in your mix, sometimes that means you lacking in your composition, because stuff wouldn't be clashing with each other if you actually knew how to layer your sounds. And you wouldn't have many stuff to mix if you knew what your beat needed. In this beat, just hearing everything, I don't feel like I need to put any creative effects. So let's just do a quick before and after how it sounded originally with no mix versus the final mix. So that's pretty much it. That's how I like to think about mixing. And like I said, you could join the waitlist to get early access and a discount for the mixing course that I'll be dropping. But if you still feel like, okay, I understand what you're saying, but I wish I could visually see it, I have another mixing tutorial that does just that. So you can watch that next. And until next time, peace.